All right, here we go. Another fantasy football mock draft is in the books. And this one was a little different. This was from about 2 weeks ago, and I'm just now getting to it. Because this mock draft, I think, is really going to stick out as far as other mock drafts that I've done is concerned. Because this one was kind of one of those special mock drafts. I've never done a mock draft like this one before, so this was my first time doing it. The way this mock draft was, it was basically two quarterbacks. And what I mean by that is there is two slots for quarterbacks in your starting lineup. So going into it, I knew that there was going to be a handful of quarterbacks that were taken at the board within the first two rounds. As you can see clearly, Mahomes was taken first overall. Honestly, that doesn't really surprise me at all because there are some leagues that I've heard about or seen, or even mock drafts that I've heard about or seen, where Mahomes gets taken first off the board. Now, mostly this could be maybe they're trying to experiment how their draft could work out if they took Mahomes with the first overall pick. But as you can see by this team right here, it looks pretty stacked here. You got Darren Waller in the second round, Hopkins in the third round. Now, Hopkins in the third round would be a steal in any other mock, but the fact that quarterbacks are going off the board in a two-quarterback league, this is kind of the ideal range because you expect at least Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson to all likelihood fall off the board, and that's what happens here. I am a bit surprised that Kyler Murray was taken over Josh Allen, but at the same time, you can kind of understand the reasoning behind it because you can argue that Kyler Murray has better weapons than Josh Allen does. So I can kind of see that, although I probably would have preferred Josh Allen, but that's just me. Either way, I think it's a really smart pick there to go with Kyler Murray because with the way the quarterbacks were falling off the board, Kyler Murray probably doesn't get back in this second round here. He probably gets taken maybe right where Justin Herbert is. Now, I don't really know what this is, taking Drew Lock in the first round. I mean, there's always that occasional troll or two that are going to be a part of these mock drafts that want to make some goofy move or something to just kind of clown around. But you know what? At least I don't have the worst draft as far as this mock is concerned, no matter what I do. Although there is a good recovery here by going with Stephon Diggs in the second round. Honestly, I really thought about going with Stephon Diggs, but I'll explain why I went with Devonte Adams instead of Stephon Diggs in just a moment. Staff in the third round, I mean, yeah, that's a pretty solid pick there, at least with the quarterbacks that were left to choose from, although maybe Ryan Tannehill, although maybe the third round could have been a little bit too early for that. I could probably mean Deshaun Watson if we were 100% sure that he was going to play this season, because, I mean, there was rumors that the Eagles were going to make a trade for him or they had an offer. But if Deshaun Watson does indeed play for Houston this season, they will be playing from behind in almost, if not all of their games, because the Texans, they are still lacking in defense, and the Texans will have one of the worst defenses in the NFL. David Montgomery in the fourth round, Kyle Pitts in the fifth. David Montgomery, the thing that concerns me about David Montgomery is, yes, he had an unbelievable season last year, but it took Tariq Cohen to go down with an ACL injury in week 3 to really get the ball rolling for David Montgomery's fantasy value. That's the one thing that if I was high on David Montgomery, that is my only concern. Now, I'm not going to go over all of these picks, probably just the ones in the first couple of rounds, just kind of see how the tone was set for all these teams. Now I want to go back to the quarterbacks here. So we have 5 quarterbacks taken in the first round. And to add that, Justin Herbert was taken in the second round. Dak Prescott was taken in the second round, surprisingly over Aaron Rodgers. Now, I know that Dak was leading the league in passing yards and was one of the best fantasy quarterbacks last season until the injury. But I just feel like with the motivated Aaron Rodgers, the fact that he's calling this season the last dance in Green Bay, I really think that there is a lot of motivation. I mean, there is a fire that is lit inside of Aaron Rodgers to get Green Bay a Super Bowl and another MVP run. Now, honestly, I think there is a 100% possibility that this is not only Aaron Rodgers' final season with the Packers, but I think it's his final season in the NFL. I actually think that 2020 was going to be Aaron Rodgers' last season until he won MVP. I feel like if he didn't win MVP, he would have retired last season. So that's just something that I wanted to put out there. Metcalf in the third round. So right away here, Mike on the mic, he's really got a really great team going with just his first 5 picks alone. McCaffrey, Rodgers, Metcalf, Josh Jacobs, Julio Jones. If Julio Jones can stay healthy, I think he can be a top 5 wide receiver in fantasy. And that is in the company of Adams, Tyreek Hill, Diggs, Metcalf, and Hopkins. So he can really put himself inside that company if he can stay healthy for the entire season. All right, so I really want to get to my squad right here. Now, I didn't really have the intention of going, quote unquote, zero quarterback strategy, as it was pointed out in the live stream that this mock draft took place on, that I was doing the zero quarterback strategy. But I guess you can, at the end of the day, you could probably consider this a high rollers mock draft. I really feel like if I really put this team out there in a 2 QB league, I actually think low key I could win the entire thing based off of what I have right here. Derrick Henry in the first round. Now, I was deciding between Derrick Henry and Nick Chubb for this 10th pick because I honestly knew I wanted to go running back in the first round. And I kind of had a strong feeling that I was going to be able to get Derrick Henry at 10. And if he was still there at 10, that was going to be my plan. But if he wasn't, Nick Chubb was that backup plan. And if Chubb wasn't there either, I probably would have gone with Tyreek Hill. So the reason why I think Derrick Henry was worth this first round pick for me, instead of going with an Aaron Rodgers or a Dak Prescott or Justin Herbert, instead of taking a quarterback in the first round, I really am playing this like I know that I'm going to get myself to that week 18 championship match. And if you look at the last 2 seasons, on the final week of the regular season, Derrick Henry has dominated against the Texans. And lo and behold, the Titans play the Texans again in that final game of the regular season. And I believe Derrick Henry in the last 2 seasons, in the final weekend of the fantasy season, I believe he has gotten, I believe it's 37 and 36 points in those last 2 seasons of the final game of the fantasy season. So if I can get myself to the final, I like my chances with Derrick Henry. Because I have confidence that if you have Derrick Henry on your team when it comes time for the championship, I honestly like your chances. And the same reason why I went with Devonte Adams instead of Stephon Diggs. Because Devonte Adams always seems to dominate at the right time, especially in the last 2 seasons of the playoffs. So just these two, having these two guys alone, even though I may not have a Mahomes, I may not have a Josh Allen, I may not have a Lamar Jackson, but I believe I have two reliable guys right here that could not only carry me to the Week 18 championship match, but they can literally carry me to winning the championship. So third round, I went with George Kittle. Now, I will be honest. I thought about possibly going running back here. I thought about Chris Carson. I thought about maybe even CeeDee Lamb or Terry McLaurin. But I kind of have a personal rule with mock drafts. And sometimes the real drafts, depending on how many people are in my league. Like if it's a 12-team league, I probably will follow through with this. But if I have an opportunity in the third round to take one of the big three tight ends in Kelsey, Waller, or Kittle, I'm going to do that. And George Kittle fell to me in the third round, so I drafted George Kittle, who was looking to have a comeback season. And depending on who the quarterback's going to be, no matter who the quarterback is going to be, for one, whether it's Garoppolo or Lance, especially if it is Trey Lance eventually, because there is a QB battle in San Francisco right now between Garoppolo and Trey Lance. I do think it's possible we could see Trey Lance starting eventually. And it's quite possible that we could see Lance being the starter. And it's quite common that the rookie quarterbacks, the younger quarterbacks, they like to target the tight ends. We saw that last season where Justin Herbert really liked targeting Hunter Henry. We've really seen Drew Lock like to target Noah Fant. So that's just a couple of examples. Now, in the fourth round, I went with Keenan Allen. And Keenan Allen, I think this is a pick that it could be high risk, high reward. I mean, I had an opportunity to go with Terry McLaurin, or even CeeDee Lamb, or even Julio Jones, but I'm just more concerned about Julio Jones' injury history. Julio Jones feels like a more high risk, high reward pick for me than it would be for Keenan Allen. And I think Herbert, he could be a dark horse candidate for MVP. And I think it's best so far right now that I have two go-to wide receivers. The number one receivers, I got really a number one target in San Francisco and George Kittle. So I may not have the quarterbacks at this point in the draft, but I at least have very reliable targets in Adams, Kittle, and Allen. And I also have Derrick Henry, which is the more durable running back out of all the running backs that have been taken, that were taken at that point. Because McCaffrey is coming up back from injury. Cook tends to miss games. Barkley is coming off of an injury. Kamara, you could say that Kamara is the more durable out of the four, but I mean, I have mixed feelings about Kamara coming into the season. And honestly, maybe I would have gone with Kamara if Henry was taken at 8. But usually when you look at PPR, those are the four running backs that would typically get it done. Nick Chubb, he missed some games last season. But on the other hand, Henry, Chubb, and Jonathan Taylor, who I really realistically could have thought about. Because when I want to draft a running back in the first round, I always want to make sure that this running back has a reliable offensive line, which I'd say out of all of these three offensive lines, I would say the Titans, they're the more reliable one out of the three. Because really, in my opinion, these are the best, three of the best offensive lines, if not the best three offensive lines in the NFL. Anyway, back to this mock here. This was probably the first thought in my mind where maybe this is one of those where I probably do regret the pick here, Darrell Henderson. I probably feel like I should have gone with Deshaun Watson. That was really probably the first of maybe 2 regrets in this mock. But, you live and learn. But I just felt like I wanted to get running backs that I felt like could be league winners. As what you can see with these next 3 picks here, Henderson and ETN. Now, with Akers out for the season, I expect Henderson to get a bulk of the carries. I expect him to be the bell cow for the Rams. And honestly, maybe in later rounds, I'll probably try to target Xavier Jones because it's always good to have at least one handcuff. And I would have gone with Miles Sanders if he came to me, but he was taking the selection before mine. So I ultimately went with Travis Etienne because that was my backup plan for that particular round. Because I think with it being PPR and with rumors throughout the early portions of the offseason that the Jaguars were practicing in formations to put Etienne at wide receiver, I think that we will probably see Etienne line up at wide receiver a lot this season, especially when you have Trevor Lawrence as your QB. Well, most likely your QB. It hasn't really been determined yet, but I would say that Lawrence will be the starter. I think that's good chemistry right there. And especially with the season that James Robinson had this past season, I would say Etienne is most likely to line up at wide receiver a lot. So that's really helping me out with PPR. In the 7th round, I went with Michael Thomas. And this is where I really got criticized by these, other people in the mock draft. This is kind of where I kind of got criticized a bit by taking Michael Thomas in the 7th round. It wasn't necessarily bad criticism. It was just that they felt like it was too early. But this is one of the high risk, high reward picks. As you can probably call my entire draft, I would say if this was a real thing, it would be a high rollers mock or a high roller risk here. Because Michael Thomas, he is expected to miss at least the first 4 games of this season. And there is also possibilities and rumors that Michael Thomas doesn't want to be on the Saints anymore and he's looking for a trade. Well, I would anticipate that Michael Thomas, if he were to indeed get traded, he would go to a contender, whether if it was Green Bay, whether if it was Buffalo, or whether if it was, I probably even put Arizona in the mix to just add another weapon for Kyler Murray. I mean, Michael Thomas is known as Slant Boy, but Slant Boy gets you points when he's healthy and when he's out there. In the 8th round, I took Devonte Smith. I really considered Adam Thielen, but Adam Thielen doesn't necessarily perform all the time when it matters. So that was my big thing right there. I probably could have gone with Robbie Anderson as well with Darnold, but I picked Devonte Smith because I really feel like he's going to definitely be the number 1 target in Philly, while Robbie Anderson is going to be competing with DJ Moore, and he's also going to, I believe, with Christian McCaffrey, he's going to take some of those PPR points away from Robbie Anderson, because as good as Robbie Anderson was last year, he wasn't necessarily reliable every single week on a consistent basis. And plus, I think Devonte Smith will win Rookie of the Year, and it's really not every mock or every draft that you can get the potential Rookie of the Year at this point in the draft, because I've seen and heard about mocks where Devonte Smith is going off in the 6th round or even sometimes in the 5th round. So in the 9th round, it was Leonard Fournette. This was a pick where I really just wanted to add more depth to the running back position. And I know Fournette is splitting carries with Ronald Jones, but I just kind of took this as sort of a handcuff pick, in case Ronald Jones gets injured, then Leonard Fournette would be the starter. So that would kind of give me a bit of an edge there that could work out in my favor. in case of injuries or in case, of the outbreaks of of the virus that has been in the world for the last year. So here's the final section of my mock here, as 3 of my final 5 picks were quarterbacks. So this was the time in the mock where I finally went the quarterback, and this was the part where it just made sense. I just felt like after that 5th round, when we saw all these quarterbacks had taken off the board, out of all these quarterbacks that were taken, from Matt Ryan to Deshaun Watson, out of those quarterbacks right there, just to name them off, Watson, Trevor Lawrence, Baker Mayfield, Kirk Cousins, you got Tua Tagovailoa, Derek Carr, Ben Roethlisberger, Justin Fields, Trey Lance. I just personally didn't feel like not many of those quarterbacks to choose from at that point after that 5th round pick that were really that reliable to me and that I could probably trust. But I just think with this fresh start in Carolina, which going with Sam Darnold in the 10th round, which honestly, that was probably the best thing that could have potentially happened. And I know I probably could have went with Carson Wentz, which Carson Wentz falls in the 12th round. But this was before we got the information that he was leaning towards a week 1 return, to return by week 1. And the 11th round with the Rams defense, I tried to see if I took a defense, if we're going to start seeing a run of defense on the board, and ultimately we did not, unfortunately. So I probably could have really gone after maybe a Will Fuller with that next pick, or maybe I could have taken a Rob Gronkowski or something, or even a Tyler Higbee. Ooh, Tyler Higbee is someone that I am really high on this fantasy season. So I probably could have gone that route. 12th runner with Cam Newton, and I know Cam Newton hasn't been officially named the Patriots quarterback, but Cam Newton, I believe, has one of, if not the easiest schedule in fantasy this season. And that is really saying something. And I think that Cam Newton, I think he's still good. I think he still has a lot left in him to perform. And I think that now that we're getting back to normal settings, I think that Cam Newton is going to really do well this season, honestly. And even if he gets benched at some point, he might as well just pick up Mac Jones. I mean, that would be my intention if this was a real league. If Cam Newton gets benched at some point, I'll just pick up Mac Jones at the waiver wire. Or I could just put in Jared Goff every week as that QB2 if Newton were to get benched. And if I needed a quarterback like for a bye week or something to fill that in, just pick somebody up off the waiver wire, as there would be quite a few that are still that didn't get drafted. And the thing with Jared Goff is, I know that Jared Goff hasn't exactly been the best and he hasn't been reliable, but I just think with the Lions playing from behind in almost, if not all, of their games, I think this is a strategic pick here for me in the 13th round, which could work out in my favor if I can get lucky here. Because with the Lions constantly playing from behind, that's more opportunity for garbage time points. And once you get down by a certain amount of points, it just seems to be a pass-only offense. I think we're going to see the Lions do a lot of passing this season. And in my final pick, I took Devonte Parker. This was a pick where I feel like was really a steal there, because Devonte Parker, I feel like with Will Fuller coming into the mix, I still think Devonte Parker has potential to be a top target for Tua Tagovailoa. I feel like Devonte Parker is going to be more used as when Jarvis Landry was used in Miami, as a secret to PPR, the secret weapon of PPR leagues. So that was my mock draft. So I defended this team as there was a demand that I did. So that's all I'm going to say on that. Like, share, and subscribe. And until next time.